views and comments of the hosts and guests are not necessarily those of the station.
Ako po si 𝗣𝘂𝗴𝗲. Iniimbitahan ko po kayong manood ng Pugad Vloggers sa DZRJ 8:10 AM Radyo Bandido TV.
Watch and listen to Pugad Vloggers Monday to Friday from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. Airing on Sky Cable Channel 224 and on all DTT boxes. Simulcasting online on Facebook and YouTube. Listen and watch on your mobile devices. Just search DZRJ Radio Bandido.
Pugad Vloggers, Pugad Vloggers, ang kurap titirisin, sa loob sa bayan wawalisin, walang sasantuhin, ang saya-saya nakakabaliw, kasama natin ang tropa. Pugad Vloggers, Pugad Vloggers.
Okay, mga kaibigan, mga kababayan, ako po si Orion Perez, Dumdum. Kumusta po kayo? Nandito po tayo sa ating palatuntunan ngayon, ang Pugad Vloggers. And we're having something a little different tonight. We're not going to be using much Tagalog because we have a guest who is not Filipino, but he's very much familiar with Philippine culture, with the Philippines, because he's married to a Filipina. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's all welcome Mr. Brendan Windus.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Orion, for allowing me to be in your program this evening. It's quite an honor, you know that.
No worries, mate. So, yeah, you know, I thought it would be great to have something a little different tonight, you know, rather than just talking in Tagalog, talking about things that I normally talk about. I'd like to sort of like hear from you as someone who's not a Filipino but is very much exposed to, you know, how things are in the Philippines, how things work. Yeah, you know, what do you think are some of the things that we need to learn from the country you're from, which is Australia? You know, what are the things that we can learn from and little things like that, you know?
Firstly, okay, World War II ended and we were underpopulated. It was about population or perish. So the good people running the country after the war opened the gates to immigration because we didn't have enough people here.
Yeah, yeah, a lot of land. You have a lot of land.
Yeah,
not so much people.
It was like unlimited space. You could do almost anything in Australia, just about. We just needed good citizens who wanted to work. And after the war, a lot of Eastern Europe was smashed. A lot of Europe was smashed. Malta was smashed. Southern Italy was smashed. So all those, a lot of those Southern European countries were in a hell of a lot of problems. And people sat down at their table, if they had one, and said, "We're getting out of here. We're going to Australia or Canada or America." So because Australia still largely, after the war, had a white Australia policy.
Yeah, yeah.
Where mostly white Europeans, no Asians back then, were allowed in the country. Slowly, the white Australia policy lost its grip on society and the political parties. So that slowly began to emerge out of the way in the 60s. But after the war, we had a lot of English, Irish, Welsh, and white European people. Naturally, you have to understand that we fought 2 wars with the English. We're on their side. So naturally there was an affinity, there was a cultural relevance, there was the English language, and England had a very hard time as well.
Yeah, yeah.
After the war in England, there was a lot of austerity programs, and Australia was almost a land of plenty. So we emerged from that post-war immigration, and today, in my region, west of Melbourne, we have approximately 150 people from different countries. 150 different countries west of the city.
What's the name of that place in the Melbourne area that you're actually in? Is that kind of close to where Werribee is? Was that
Werribee's west. There's a lot of Filipinos in Werribee. You got Filipinos in Caroline Springs. You have Filipinos in Sunshine. You have Filipinos in Caroline Springs and 𝗕𝗹𝗴𝗱. And in most western suburbs, cities, you're going to have a good bunch of Kuyas and out there's that have come here for a good life.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
They could probably be okay by themselves back in the Philippines, but they've actually grasped the opportunity of prosperity for the next generation.
Yeah.
Because
there was actually, I remember, Brendan, I think there was a wave of, I would refer to it as a wave of white Filipino emigration into Australia. So there was a small sector of the Philippine population was of European descent, Spanish, largely Spanish. And there was quite a number of them back in the 60s and 70s who they basically started moving all the way to Australia in droves. And then it continued on in the 80s. So like 𝗕𝗹𝗴𝗲𝗃, for example, he's one of those. He's from that group. And then there was Ignatius Jones, who was like a recording artist, and the singer. He's actually Filipino. So Filipino of Spanish descent. So that, I mean, a lot of them, I think, in a way, I'm not sure when the white Australia policy went away, but they probably kind of
60s, slowly in the 60s, under the Holt government. But when early 70s, when 𝗕𝗹𝗴𝗱 was elected, it was like, just come on down, guys, come on down. There's plenty of jobs here. There was less restrictions during the 𝗕𝗹𝗴𝗱 administration. Previously, in the Holt administration, the Liberal administration in the late 1960s, they slowly opened the door, and they gradually broke down the white Australia policy.
Oh, there you go.
It was populate or perish.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember. Did some of the relaxation of foreign investment rules start out during 𝗕𝗹𝗴𝗱's time?
Yeah,
or was it
gradually.
it seems, right?
Look, but our manufacturing base was still largely factories.
Yeah.
And those factories still have protectionism
and
high tariffs. All our cars were made in Australia with high tariffs. We had Ford here. We had Ford and GM were here in Melbourne and Adelaide. And they prospered under a protectionist policy, and it was also supported by the taxpayers.
I see.
As a result, there was a lot of jobs. There was tens of thousands of jobs in the motor industry here. So people from Europe, people from poor countries in Europe, they flocked to the motor industry because there was plenty of money and plenty of work. And that's what a lot of people wanted when they come from Europe. A smashed old country. You had you got to remember that communism took over a lot of Eastern Europe.
Yeah.
And Tito took over Yugoslavia.
Yep.
Now, Tito wasn't hard line, but it was still not easy to get out.
Yeah,
so
he was still very
a lot of Yugoslavs come to Australia and Melbourne, and they prospered and they always had a factory to work in.
I see. Okay.
So gradually, as time went by, the government had different priorities with the money. So they gradually and definitely broke down all the tariffs and stopped the protectionism from the taxpayer.
I see. Okay.
Subsequently, Asian labour became cheaper. Asian labour is still very cheap today.
Yeah.
The cost of making a vehicle is much, much cheaper in Asia than having an Australian assembly line.
I see. And then because there were no more tariffs, most of the vehicles had to be imported from outside. I see. All right. Hey, so I'm just curious, Brendan. You're married to a Filipino. Have you spent time in the Philippines before? Like, have you had time to basically live? Maybe a year or 6 months.
The best part is the beaches. It's hot. It's relaxing. It's laid back. All the hotel staff speak English. They're very polite, very respectful, and it's easy to talk to those people. It's easy to relax and enjoy a resort, go to the beach, grab a cab, get a driver to take you down to the market to get some T-shirts and some fresh fruit and things like that. So once you're prepared and you know the Filipino style of way of doing things, they're a bit laid back, they're a bit chill. It's a bit, no worries, we can help you, sir. And it's always important to be generous with your tip. So if you've got the guy on the tricycle and he's taking you around down to the market, down to a restaurant, get some T-shirts, get some fresh fruit, get a pair of shorts and things like that down the local market, make sure you make sure you're tipping good. And because you give them a good tip, that's a week's wages.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So I'm just wondering, wondering from your end, have you sort of not just visited, but spent extended periods of time in the Philippines? Have you had that chance, or?
What I've done previously is taken 2 weeks or 3 weeks with my wife. My wife's in Laguna.
Okay. I see.
So
okay.
We spend a bit of time in Laguna with the family, go into Manila, see the relatives, all the pinsans.
Yeah. The cousins.
Pinsan talaga.
Pinsan talaga. Good.
So catch up with the relatives.
You're pretty much exposed to how things work in the Philippines.
I've had about 5 trips. These days, my wife goes back. She doesn't do any touring anymore. She just stays with mum and dad and Lola. You see,
I see.
This is a very typical situation. Mum and dad were OFWs.
Yeah. Her mom and dad.
Yes, both mum and dad. They were both.
What's the story there? What's the story there of her parents? Were they both working in the same place, or one was working in one country and the other one was working in another country? Dad
first went to Italy in Turin.
Going
back to the south. So Dad was there first. So Dad started earning as a helper, as a caretaker, as an odd job man, hands-on kind of tradie guy. So Dad's doing that, and then he calls his wife and says, "You better come with me. It's been 2 years. I want you to come with me now. You have to come over with me because if you stay together, we stay together. So you better come over." Back then, the father was still a young man in the 70s, late 70s. So he definitely wanted his wife. So he petitioned his wife to come and work with him as a carer, a caretaker, a cleaner, a yaya, a cook, help with the children, take the kids to school, buy the groceries, come back to the house, cook and clean and tidy, and do the ironing and laundry for the wealthy Italians.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And there was a lot of
very typical Filipino story in Italy. That's kind of how it goes. Yeah.
And they had to go to the north of Italy because the north of Italy was wealthy.
Yeah, that's where the industries are. That's where the car making is done. Yeah.
90% of Italy's GDP comes from the north.
Yeah, that's true.
North of Rome, GDP. You got your powerful political families. You got your powerful political organizations. You got your economic cliche up there in the north. So that's where a lot of wealthy people are, and they want Filipinos to look after the children, cook, clean, tidy, buy the groceries and cook and look after the house. And also they would probably have a resort house in the mountains. Mm-hmm. So that's usually a caretaker, cleaner job for the father who would just take care of things and make sure everything was okay when the Italians went to do their July, August holidays. Excuse me.
So that's okay. So that's how the parents of your wife sort of made a living. Now the thing is, they're kids. How many children? Is it your wife and how many brothers and sisters? Two brothers. Were they left behind in the Philippines?
At first, hang on, let's get. At first, the mum took the youngest boy with her.
Okay, yeah.
So mum arrived with the youngest boy to join the father.
I see.
And my wife at the time, of course, there's no jobs in the Philippines. She completed university, no jobs. Naturally, there's no jobs.
Yeah.
Because she's a normal person, no rich tito, no rich connection, no political connection, nothing. So she got a job in London with a property developer.
I see. Now, just curious. Your wife, she spent a lot of time without her parents. Is that like she grew up in the Philippines, and her parents were actually in Italy, right?
When the parents left, she was in primary school.
Oh my!
And she's the middle. So there were 2 kids in primary school with Lola back home. It's a very common story. Lola takes after children.
That's the common story that I hear all the time. Yeah.
Look, Mum had a shop. She had a sari. But you don't make dollars. You make peso. So Mum was very good in the sari, but you can't make a living out of a sari.
Not really.
You make a living day to day. You don't make week for week or month for month. So you make a few peso one day, you make a lot of peso the next day. You don't make much peso on Friday. Whatever the situation is, they get by okay. And Dad had a farm. Dad had a farmlet. So Dad was a born and raised farmer. Anyway, we'll get back to that. So my wife took a job in London with an estate with a property developer behind the Lord's Cricket Ground. Anybody who knows London would know Lord's Cricket Ground. She was working in a building behind there with the property developer who were Serbian.
I see. Okay.
Another story. But and then naturally they got homesick. So she got homesick, but she saved enough money to buy a computer internet shop in her barangay.
I see. No, that's good.
So I get a message on my phone. In a messenger, I think, I'm single. So I'm thinking, wow, she looks nice. Who's she? So to cut the story short, we connected with Messenger, and I went and saw her in 2009. I got a month holiday in 2009, and wow, she's pretty. Wow, she's smart. Wow, she speaks good English. And she's smart. So she had all the prerequisites of a good catch. Like many Filipinas, they're quite pretty girls. Slim, pretty, intelligent, polite, respectful. They've got all the basic qualities of a good wife. So we then went back in 2010, 2011. We got married in 2012. Here's a funny story. We're up there in Pagaput Beach. Pagaput Beach up on the sand?
Pagaput Beach in Ilocos, in the north.
And I thought, oh, gee, I've got to marry this girl. I'm not the greatest romantic, I'm telling you now. I'm an Australian. I'm not a Filipino. I'm not romantic. I'm not sentimental. So I said, Michelle, do you want to get married? She says, yeah, but we've got to go back to Manila and get a ring. Okay, deal. So she agreed to get married. We went back to Manila, down to Glorieta. And I got her a ring, and then we went back home just to see Mum and Dad and all the family.
Wow.
I told the family, look, Mum,
we'll hold that thought a bit. So essentially, she grew up without her parents. Her parents were in Italy the whole time. Did they ever get to visit when she was growing up? Or
first time I came back in 2000. First time I visited in 2009 was July. And at the time, the Italians were on holidays. So Mum and Dad go back home.
Were they able to do that every year, or is it once
every year? Yeah.
Just about every year. Okay, that's good at least, because I hear the horror stories of other OFWs. Takes them 5 years before they can actually go home.
Yeah, and they had a legal visa, so that was okay. There was no messing around with the visa. That was clean.
That's good.
That was a clean exit, clean entry. So Mum and Dad would go home once a year for balik bayan.
As balik bayans. All right.
Yeah.
So from your own observation, what is it that you see in the Philippines that's preventing us from having enough jobs. It sort of forces people to have to leave, you know, and become OFWs and all that.
Absolutely. It's pretty obvious. First, you got about 10 million Filipinos overseas legally. 10 million legally. Don't forget about the illegals, all right? But you got 10,000 who are valid OFWs. They can't get a job.
10,000 or 10 million? Is it 10,000 or 10 million?
Well, 10 million, wouldn't it?
I think it's more like 10 million.
Because they repatriate 36 billion with a B.
Yeah.
So there's got to be the big numbers there.
Yeah.
Look, they can't get a job. They have to go overseas. Or it's tamad-tambay.
Tamad-tambay.
If they don't go overseas and get a good living with pounds, euros, American dollars, a strong currency, well, they're stuck at home and they've got to flip burgers for 50 pesos a day or something like that at McDonald's. And that's the extremely competitive market. You have university people, checkout chicks in pure gold because they're the most qualified and they've got university qualifications. And they can't get a job after university because they've got no rich Tito to give them a job.
Yeah.
They don't have the political connection.
It's terrible. It's just terrible because what we have is this major imbalance where you have just too many job seekers and not too many jobs. And I think that's the perfect recipe for why, based on the law of supply and demand, you'd have very low wages because of that.
Yeah. That provides a perfect formula for exploitation.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of those nurses that fall off the assembly line, there's a big assembly line called nursing, and just to get experience, that will work in a hospital for nothing.
It's even worse, Brendan. It's worse. It's worse because I heard that in some cases, the hospitals require that those nursing graduates have to pay money to be able to receive 2 years worth of internship, to be able to comply with a 2-year 2-year requirement that they need to be able to go to, London, Australia, to the UK, to Australia, to the US, wherever.
And your senators don't stop that. All your politicians say, "I'll get them on. Yeah, make them pay, make them suffer, make them be exploited.
Make them send their remittances back." So no one.
Excuse me 1 second.
No worries. No one seems to think about creating jobs.
I'm on the phone.
Yeah, no one seems to think about creating jobs so that people won't need to leave.
It's all about control the constitution, control the economy, and control the profits for your own family.
Yeah. What are your thoughts about the Constitution of the Philippines?
It was written by 𝗕𝗹ន់, an oligarch. And it has to be rewritten from front page to back page. It has to be totally rewritten to modernize the economy, to modernize the outlook on life, to modernize the chance of the Filipinos to prosper. This constitution keeps them in a big black hole. It's called protectionism. It's called oligarch protectionism. And it's totally riddled the country and the people don't have a chance. A few come through the cracks and they make it, but the vast masses are stuck in the barangay, or they're old enough to go overseas, so they're forced to go and work in Dubai, or they're forced to be a maid somewhere.
That's exactly what happens. I mean, that's really what happens. So you look at the provinces, the rural areas, you'd see all these houses, right? These are so-called nice houses, but there's the children living there, but then the breadwinners are all abroad.
Yep.
What's actually funding those households in the provinces are OFWs. It's almost every single household is supported by OFWs.
Particularly the provinces, because the provinces are economically ripped off, totally ripped off, and they're controlled by powerful families. So everything in the province is controlled by a powerful family.
Yeah, and then that happens because so you've stifled the ability to have a great economy, right? The only people who are rich enough to become politicians and all that are the landed folks who've
Yes.
already owned tracts of land and all that, so they have money already. Everyone else has to basically go abroad to become an OFW.
You still have a fundamental feudalism.
Yeah, it is feudalism.
Where you have
It is
the
feudalism.
hacienda, where you have the white-skinned hacienda people, and everybody else is a goddamn slave.
Yeah, it's terrible. It's terrible. You know, I'll let you know about one of the things that really destroys the provinces in the Philippines. You know, so there inside the Constitution, there is Article 10, Section 12, which is the clause that talks about the so-called independent, highly urbanized cities, right?
Yep.
So how this works is it basically says it's the clause that essentially causes the creation of these independent, highly urbanized cities, which are cities that are geographically located inside a province,
Yeah.
but they are not administratively part of the province because they've become rich enough, they've become urbanized enough, you know, in probably semi-industrialized, you know, rich enough. And because they became rich enough, they hit this threshold, they are removed from the province and they are made to report directly to the
Manila.
national government. Yeah, to the
Manila.
national government.
To the palace.
So the provinces always remain poor.
Yep.
Because
And
the moment a city becomes rich enough, it's taken out.
Yep.
That's the problem.
So the provinces have to become a subservient to the Malacayan.
To Malacanang, yeah, that's what
They
happened.
have to be a servant.
Oh man, it's just terrible. I mean, so I remember there was a professor. I had a discussion with him, and he basically said, "No, we can't do federalism because all the provinces in the Philippines are poor." And I said, "No, wait a minute.
Oh,
The
there's a
only
reason
reason
for
why
that?
the provinces are poor, is because of the algorithm that was created by the 1987 Constitution, where in Article 10, Section 12, when a city becomes rich enough, it's automatically it gets taken out of the province. So because of this, every time you have a rich city, that city is taken out of the province. So the province is left only with poor towns and cities. And that's what happens.
You just got left with the serfdom.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're controlled by an oligarch who's the master.
It's terrible. It's terrible. I mean, obviously, we'd like to have an economic system where there'd be so many jobs so that hardworking poor people, people who were born as the sons and daughters of farmers, of really poor people, but they're hardworking. They will be able to move up. That's what we want. We want a society. We want an economy like that, but we don't have one.
No. That's
We
because
made it impossible.
That's because you have to upset the economic system, and there'd be more wealth for the people instead of the politicians, instead of the political families. You take away the big political families, and then you got a better chance of prosperity for the people. Or, however, there is a succession of families that just stay in politics. So the son, the daughter, the sister-in-law, the brother-in-law, all the kids and the family and the nephews and the nieces, they go straight back into politics because it's an easy way to steal money.
Yeah. And then the kind of system that we have, which is the presidential system, which it's a one person decision maker system. So at the top you have the president. Yep. At the provincial level, you have a one single person leader who's the governor, and then down at the at those smaller units, you have the mayoral system. So it's all just a one-person type of system, unlike a parliamentary system where it's kind of more like a committee, right? And if there's one person who's not doing the leader is not doing a good job, he can easily be replaced. I mean, well, this happened to Australia several times. You've had a lot of changes, right?
Also, you look at the 150 poorest countries. The 150 countries at the bottom of the chart, from the 150 right at the bottom, about 146 of those are presidential.
Yeah, exactly.
148
exactly.
maybe.
It's
maybe Zimbabwe is the prime minister, but you know what happens there. So you still got 148.
No, Zimbabwe. They are presidential. A lot of countries. Yeah, a lot of countries in Africa, right after they became independent. So they inherited the British system, right?
Yeah, but they didn't change it.
But then when they became independent, they were looking at the US as the model, and they saw, hey, the most post World War II, it was the Americans who became sort of like the top dog. All these African countries that were using parliamentary systems said, no, let's get away. Let's do away with the parliamentary system. Let's go with the presidential system. And that's when things went worse.
Yeah.
So you had Kenya, Ghana,
Nigeria,
Zimbabwe. Yeah.
Powerful families took over in Africa. Or there was a coup and they would shoot the president and somebody else would take over from the army.
That's what happened. There's a
lot of interference with the Soviet Union, and the Americans were using them as proxy states also during the Cold War.
I know. So the bad part about it is, all due to this initial desire to copy the US, so many countries, including the Philippines, got mired in issues because of the use of the presidential system. And now in America, it's all unraveling. We can see that their use of the presidential system has produced the embarrassing gaffes and boo-boos of Biden. With Biden, oh my gosh.
He called Zelensky Putin today or yesterday.
He did. No, that's today. That was just today.
Yeah.
That was earlier today. He called Zelensky Putin. He called his own VP Harris Trump. He's really senile now. Well, you wouldn't have that in the parliamentary system, because every week they would at least have this debate. They'd have question time, and the prime minister would always be grilled actively by the opposition. And anyone who is senile or has dementia would have immediately been exposed.
In fact, another faction would have deseated him and had another president, because another faction was also powerful inside the party. So another faction would have dumped Biden in a
parliamentary system.
A parliamentary system. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just sad, though. It's just really sad, though, that the USA has to go with this. Now, the problem is, I see this as a problem, particularly for you guys, the Aussies and the Kiwis and the British and the Canadians, because you guys are all part of the Five Eyes alliance, right? And obviously, being the richest country in the group, the US kind of essentially calls the shots. Yeah. But every time they say we need to go to this country for war, you guys are dragged into it.
Yeah, we tag along.
You tag along. Yeah, no choice. You've got no choice, because that's the nature of this partnership that you have.
Yeah.
Right? So I think it would be a good idea if you guys, the Aussies, the Kiwis, the Brits, and the Canucks, you all tell the Americans, hey, your system is weighing you down. Yes. Why don't you? Yeah, I mean, you're weighing us down, particularly because when you get into trouble, we have to join you guys in trouble that we did not cause.
Yeah, and
it may have been caused.
Some of our boys don't go home.
Yeah, exactly. So you guys got to tell the Americans, hey, fix your system. All of us are using a parliamentary system. We don't get these shutdowns. We don't end up with people like Biden making a big fool of themselves. You know,
in many situations, it has to get worse before it gets better. So the is going to get worse before it gets better. It's like being an alcoholic. It's like being an alcoholic. You have to get to the bottom first before
they got to hit rock bottom first. Yeah. They got to hit rock bottom first, and that's the only time they see that things are so bad. That's when they go to rehab. But when things are still okay, they won't want to do anything. That's the sad part of it.
Well, you can also say a wise man said a long time ago, "You get the government you deserve."
Yeah, that's what happens. No, it's really sad.
Filipinos might complain about their president. Americans might complain about their president, but they get the government they deserve because they voted for them.
Yeah. The good thing about having a parliamentary system, though, is the moment that leader is found out to be not so competent, the way he presented himself initially, at least in a parliamentary system, there's a way to get rid of him and instantaneously get him changed. I mean, changes like this happened a lot in Australia over the past 14 years already. I mean, I remember how it was after John Howard, you had Rudd, and then after Rudd there was Gillard. After Gillard it was Rudd again. After that it was Tony Abbott. After Tony Abbott it was Malcolm Turnbull. And then it's this whole leadership spill sort of thing just kept on happening.
There was always another prime minister before Christmas.
Yeah. Now, I mean, then that's one of the things that happens, because if someone makes some major mistakes, it's easy to just replace him. They did that in the UK as well. So, I mean, Boris Johnson was partying in the middle of COVID, right? And I think that's what basically did him in. So, you know.
He got rid of Brexit, but he had too many drinks at number 10, and he got busted. So you can't tell lies to the people. It's different in Commonwealth democracies. It's very, very difficult to continually tell lies to the people, because either the opposition blows you up or your factions blow you up.
Exactly. There's that. I feel is a better check and balance. You know, because it's more instantaneous. You find that there's a problem, it can easily be fixed. The guy who's making all the mistakes can easily get replaced. Right?
And if you tell a lie in Parliament in front of the question time, you can be dismissed.
He can be dismissed. Yeah.
And that will never happen in the Philippines. Never happen in the Philippines, because the system doesn't work like that. They perpetuate stupidity and nepotism.
Oh, I just feel so bad, because there have been so many cases where people say, no, it's never going to work for us. We're totally different. And I tell them, I say, hey, wait a minute. We're not so different from the Malaysians. The Malaysian people, you know, particularly the Malays, they're very similar to Filipinos. I mean, yes, I understand they're mostly Muslim and they're mostly Christian for Filipinos, fine. But underneath those religious differences, Filipinos and Malays are very, very, very similar. And yet it's working, you know, a bit better than what we have in the Philippines. In Malaysia, they have a parliamentary system. They have a better economy than the Philippines. They're a lot. I mean, fine, it's not perfect, right? But at least it's better.
And Filipinos work in Malaysia too.
Exactly. So we are exposed to Malaysia. It's just sad that there's a lot of this I think misinformation about how
there's a vested interest. There's a vested interest in the status quo.
It's just sad, because if you think about it, if you had really intelligent oligarchs, there are people who might be intelligent enough to realize that if they helped to fix the system, they would actually be much richer than they are today. They would be, so they're rich already, but everybody else is dirt poor, right? How about having a system where everyone moves up, including the richest of the rich? They get rich. Everybody, poor people move to middle class people become rich, and they who are already rich become ultra rich. I mean,
Then you have-
everybody.
And then they have to invest in the education system.
They would. But then it would be better for everyone because they
It would be, but
it would be
the
better for them.
oligarchs don't want,
right?
the oligarchs don't want people asking questions, so they don't educate them.
That's the small-mindedness of it, because they don't realize that they'd be better off once ordinary Filipinos were also better off. Why? They who are already rich would be able to flaunt their wealth and not fear that their wealth would be stolen away from them.
And
They could drive around in fancy cars, right, and not fear being kidnapped. That's one of the things that they would have if we improve the society so much that these rich people, they would no longer have poverty in their midst. They would no longer be afraid to walk around wearing fancy clothes, riding a nice car, and then fear that they might get kidnapped.
They wouldn't need bodyguards.
They wouldn't even need bodyguards. They wouldn't need bodyguards.
Also,
I mean, that's the thing in Singapore. They don't need bodyguards.
Down in Laguna, we used to drive past that Honda factory.
Ah, the one in Santa Rosa, I think.
Yeah, down there. We used to drive past it way back when I first went to the Philippines, and there were cars outside and people were working because people had parked their cars to go to work. And then I noticed, where's all the cars gone? So later on, there was no cars parked there because it was closed down. No more factory. The factory was there, but there were no more workers.
Oh, that's too bad.
Also, you got the price of electricity is very high in the Philippines. So the price of electricity is uncompetitive.
It's not. And I have a friend who's an economist, and we were discussing this, and he said, actually, if the Philippines had been more open to allowing foreign investors to get into the electricity distribution and generation sectors, we would probably have a much more competitive pricing for electricity. We'd have electricity that's cheaper than what we have right now.
And
that's
no
the problem. Indeed. But that's the problem that we have, because there's not. I mean, first of all, the companies that we have in the Philippines, they're not able to invest in the new technology.
No, they can't.
Don't have the money. They don't have the know-how.
They still got typewriters.
No,
They still got
that's really
typewriters
sad.
and a paper filing system.
They still use filing cabinets. Yeah. No, it's really sad. We're still stuck in the old way of doing things. And that's because we
most
don't
powerful
have
people make these decisions to do nothing.
They want to keep things the way they were in the 70s and 80s. I think that's the problem. They don't want to move forward and modernize.
No, because the oligarchs control the economy, and they don't want to give up their power or political influence or economic grip on the economy. That's why if I had a burger place, if I opened a Brent's Burgers, I need you to take 60%.
Yeah.
I can't establish a burger chain, and that's probably the reason why you can't get a Jollibee in the rest of Australia. You got one Jollibee, I think, is in Sydney, because a lot of Filipinos in the west of Sydney. That was probably the one reason why there's only one Jollibee in Australia.
Oh my gosh.
Because Australians cannot invest in the domestic economy unless you've got a 60% partner. But I've got 100% of the capital, but I take 40% of the profits. That's doomed to failure.
I was speaking with a friend yesterday in another show that I handle yesterday. We were talking about how the 𝗕𝗹𝗴𝗴𝗲𝗀 3 airport terminal had a problem because of the 60/40 issue. Now, I don't know if you remember that story. We wanted to have a new terminal which was modern, based on international best practices. So we brought in a German company called Fraport, Frankfurt. I think it was the Frankfurt airports company, right? Because of the constitutional restrictions, they could only own 40%. So there had to be a 60% local partner called 𝗕𝗂𝗴𝗱, right? Now, the nature of how things work in the Philippines with all the red tape, the bureaucratic mess and all that, there were a lot of cost overruns in the whole project, right? And it turns out, it seems like 𝗕𝗂𝗴𝗱, the local partner, did not have enough money to to plow back into the project to deal with those cost overruns. So the one that decided to help out in dealing with the cost overruns was the German partner. So the Germans, they had the money, they had the know-how, and they were limited only to 40%. But then they said, all right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to put in more money, but we need you guys to match so that we maintain the 60-40 arrangement that exists. But then 𝗕𝗂𝗴𝗱 was not able to do that because they didn't have any money in the first place. So when, let's say, for example, say 40%, right, was what the German company owned, they added another they doubled the money that they put in. So they ended up having a huge amount of money, which now was no longer just limited to 40%. So now they ended up probably owning 55 or 60% of the company because they put in so much money. 𝗕𝗂𝗴𝗱 did not add anything else, right? And therefore, they were now no longer in compliance with the constitution. And because of all this, there was like this stop order from the courts. Hey, why is it that the German partner has more money, more ownership in this project? Why the more than 40%, blah, blah, blah. Why is that the case? And then the government lost a lot of money because of the lawsuits that came out of this. So it was a huge mess.
And you still got a 1986 airport.
Yeah, I know. So that's the problem. We are still stuck with lousiness because of the constitution.
You're stuck with mediocrity.
Well, yeah, with mediocrity. We have mediocrity because of the way the constitution stifles the ability of foreign funds to come in.
And you ask the average Filipino on the jeepney tomorrow morning, what do you think of the 40-60 rule? Bar. They're just going to work. Yeah, they're just going to work so they can get rice on the table tonight. They don't care about 40-60, but they know that 4 or 5 or 6 of their families are already overseas working, as well as their neighbour. As well as their neighbours, they're overseas working too. But one of them on the bus going to work the next day.
That's why we need to educate them about why the 1987 Constitution is really defective and needs to be changed and fixed and all that, There needs to be an overhaul. There needs to be an overhaul, a reset, if you will.
It should be rewritten back to front.
Yeah, exactly.
Page 1 to page 100, just rewrite it again for prosperity, not for protectionism.
Exactly.
You have to replace protectionism with prosperity.
It's just really sad, So we're down to the last 9 minutes of the show. So I'd like to check with you, Brendan. What do you think? What are some of your, in a nutshell, what are your ideas of what the Philippines should do to improve itself? From a
infrastructure
big point of view.
Those infrastructure plans that 𝗕𝗂𝗴𝗱 started, what was it, 15 or 16? How many got finished?
There's a lot of them, yeah.
So who's going to finish them? The Japanese, right? The Japanese are going to finish them. So you have to improve your infrastructure first. And you have to have clean water. So anybody that goes to the Philippines can turn on the tap and drink a bit of water and not get a disease in the gut. So there's massive infrastructure that has to be improved, not just a few roads and a few traffic lights. And this infrastructure has to be improved in the 𝗣𝘂𝗴𝗱. Infrastructure has to be improved right down in Mindanao too. So the infrastructure has to be spread and improved and decentralized out of Manila.
Yeah, that's true. And so we need decentralization to happen. So
economic decentralization.
Yeah. We can't have everything all based in Metro Manila. We need to have the emergence of regional centers.
Yep.
So the people don't have to all crowd into the capital.
Right. And then maybe all the slum people go back to the provinces. All the people in slums,
which is where they're
might
originally
go back to the provinces to get a job.
Yeah, yeah. Because the jobs will now be there, not just all in Metro Manila.
Also, you have to have a modern health system with contraception. Now, the church is going to interfere every time, but you can't have a prosperous country. You can't have GDP at, say, 6%, and your population growth is 5%. That only gives you 2% GDP. Because you have more mouths to feed. If you have more mouths to feed, it's going to lower your GDP, and more mouths to feed means more poverty. You've got very, very bad statistics with teenage pregnancies.
No, that's really bad. Yeah, yeah.
But the church is going to interfere with that because they can't touch contraception as far as the church goes. See, 500 years...
what's really bad is I've seen bishops sort of like campaigning against constitutional reform. They don't even understand what it's all about, but then they're just going against it. You know, it's just really sad.
They preach politics from the pulpit. They scare the people with politics from the pulpit.
I know, and they're trying to direct policy, secular policies, by intimidating. It's terrible.
Poverty, roads. You've got to improve your roads. You've got to tell people how to drive properly. You try driving in the Philippines here in Melbourne, and you're going to lose your license in 3 months. They wouldn't last 100 days driving like that here. What do I think? Higher pay. You have to give the people more wages, but that is controlled by oligarchs as well. Your wages policy is controlled by your politicians who want to screw people into the ground as hard as they can.
No, I think, and this is where I'd come in here, Brendan, and say I think part of the problem with the wage policy really is that's just the way the market works. If there's just way too many people without jobs, way too many job applicants, and too few jobs, naturally, you're really going to have very, very low wages at the end of the day. So I think the best way forward, even without a minimum wage, if we just make sure that we end up having 10 times more jobs than there are job seekers, naturally the median income, medium wages would increase. And I think they'd increase a lot. They'd 1 job seeker. If you had more jobs, 10 times more jobs than there are job seekers, so that job seekers basically could choose, I don't like that job, it's too far away. Oh, wait a minute, there's another job that's just right next door. I can go there. So they have all the job, they have all the choices they can make. I think that's how it's going to work, right?
Yep. I was like, it's gone out of my head. Sorry, it's gone straight out of my head. Sorry, just keep going.
No, yeah. So there's all these problems with the way the Constitution was set up, and I think this is what I think. We shouldn't be afraid to learn from what others have done. We shouldn't be afraid to copy, because I mean, this is one thing where you're allowed to copy. In school, you're not allowed to copy your seatmate's work. That would be cheating, right? But countries, on the other hand, they are allowed, fully allowed, in fact, encouraged to copy what other countries are doing.
And you have to improve your defense forces.
Yep.
Because for the next 1,000 years, you're going to be relying on Uncle Sam to keep China out of your waters. You have to rely on Uncle Sam because Filipinos only got patrol boats. And fishermen. All you got is fishermen out there. And then you go back to the Subic policy, which was another story for another day. But when Subic got closed down, China got 1 mile closer every time. They got 1 mile closer. And if you're not careful, they're going to land a Palawan. Who's going to defend you? Americans.
that was one of the what do you call unintended consequences of closing down the U.S. bases when the U.S. bases were closed down. I mean, because when we still had the U.S. bases, the U.S. Air Force and Navy, they sort of like patrol the Spratlys for free.
Yeah.
You know, they did that for free. But now, when they were forced to leave, well, it was Pinatubo, the volcano.
Yeah, and knocked out Clark.
Yeah. When that happened, when they left, then there was no one to sort of like do the patrolling. So that, I think that really messed it up for us.
So where'd the money go? Where'd the money go?
Yeah, and that's the problem. Now, if we became a rich country by firstly allowing so many foreign investors to come in, these companies would eventually pay taxes anyway. Their employees would pay taxes. The tax money becomes government revenue. That revenue can be used to beef up and improve the defense forces, etc., and so forth. All our road infrastructure, our bridges, schools, hospitals, they would all improve because we'd have money to maintain them, right? Our army, our navy, our air force would now have real credible materiel to use. Credible force, you know.
You would eventually have an air force, not a no force.
Exactly. Well, hey, Brendan, we're actually down to the last minute now. So, any final words? Maybe 20 seconds worth of message.
Have a look at how Singapore runs a country. It's clean.
Yeah, there you go.
Efficient. There's no corruption. There's extremely little crime. Everyone's got a job, almost. Everyone's educated. Everyone speaks English, and they've got great GDP, and they've got a fantastic savings and national savings plan. Singapore runs a profit because they're not corrupt. Nobody in Singapore is corrupt, or they get jailed.
That's what we need to do. We need to learn best practices. Singapore has shown the way. They used to be a poor country. Now they're a rich country.
They were nothing.
They were nothing. We can learn from what they did. And I think that's how we end today's show. It's 8 p.m. now. Brendan, thanks for being on the show and sharing your insights.
Ryan. My pleasure.
Yeah. Thanks, because that was really helpful. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for being here with us on the show. It's a little different today. We didn't use Tagalog. We did use a little bit of Tagalog words here and there, but it was a mostly English show. But share it around. A lot of educated Filipinos would have loved to actually watch the show. So please do share this. And ladies and gentlemen, thanks for being here. My name is Orion Perez Dumdum, and thanks again to Brendan, our guest, for being here with us.
Maraming salamat.
Maraming salamat sa inyo, mga kababayan at mga kaibigan. Next time ulit, Pugad Vloggers. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. God bless.
Pugad Vloggers, ang kurap titirisin, sa loob sa bayan wawalisin, walang sasantuhin, ang saya-saya nakakabaliw, kasama natin ang tropang Pugad Vloggers. Pugad Vloggers.
The views and comments of the hosts and guests are not necessarily those of the station.